beautiful souls, and welcome to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I almost just messed up my name, Jessie Brown, and I am so excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 196. If you missed my last episode, number 195, I shared with you all 5 powerful questions to raise your self-awareness. I am in such a giddy mood. I've been trying to find composure to get myself to chill out enough to record this episode. The last couple of days, my mom used to always say when we were super hyper when we were younger, you're acting like you have ants in your pants, meaning like can't sit still. And I feel like that's just been me the last couple of days. Even right now, I'm like, oh my God, here on my microphones. My brain's just all over the place. I've been trying to sleep and it just feels like my brain is going in so many different areas. And so let's have some fun today. I'm really excited. I have to just share because it's super funny. I will be swearing in just a second, so just like a little warning if you have kids around or anything like that. But I was chatting with my partner because I was talking about potentially changing the dynamic of my podcast. And I'm like, what if instead of Hey Beautiful Souls, I just started my podcast and said, sup bitches? And so for the last 10 minutes, I've been laughing by myself just at the thought of starting my podcast like that. That's what I mean by it's just been the most ridiculous little things that have just had me in stitches, which honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing to be in such a good headspace that you find little things in life funny. And quite honestly, it's refreshing. I was going through it the last couple of months and really struggling deeply. And so I'm just celebrating and honoring this phase of my life. And that really is what life is going through the phases. Just because you're having a bad chapter, a bad month, a bad week, a bad day, whatever, doesn't make it a bad life. And life is about riding that wave and learning the lessons that you're supposed to learn along that journey. But when we paint certain things as just like black or white, good or bad, it doesn't give us permission to just ride it and learn it and allow it to ebb and flow. And so as I'm in this phase, I'm just allowing myself to enjoy it and be here. And hopefully I can radiate some of that onto you guys. I've been posting more on my social media, which has honestly been filling my cup to connect with brand new people I've never connected with before. And so I just started posting on TikTok as well, which I never in a million years thought I would post on TikTok, consistently. And so I've just been having fun, honestly, and living my best life, being excited. And I'm really excited to jump on here for today's topic because it is one that we've talked about on here before. It was one of my first episodes where we talked about the window of tolerance. And it is one of my favorite things in the whole wide world because it was the first, or what would I call this? The first handout, I'm trying to think of a certain word, modality or education. The first way trauma was explained to me, it made no sense. And then when I was taught the window of tolerance, that was probably an easier way of saying that, it started to all make sense to me. But the thing is the window of tolerance is not taught to us in school. And it's something that I try to now teach when I go into schools and to bring into my presentations, because had I known and understood what the window of tolerance was at a young age, going through high school, going through college, even now in my life, I reference the window of tolerance all the time. It just allows us to have compassion for ourselves. It allows us to hold respect. And I think self-compassion is the word that just keeps coming up in my consciousness. It allows us to be gentle with ourselves when we're going through the ebb and flow of our emotions. But when these things aren't taught to us, we're very good at self-victimizing, where we think we're alone in our struggles. We think that these things are only affecting us. We think that there's something wrong with us. And so I'm going to get in more in depth into what the window of tolerance is and what it looks like. But I first just want to preface very, very loudly that each and every one of us on the face of this earth has an internal alarm system. It has been wired and molded and shaped throughout your life, and it's going to look different for each of us, and that alarm system is called your amygdala. Each of us have different shaped amygdalas, meaning various sizes depending again on traumas and things that we've been through. And so different things are going to trigger and set off each of our unique alarm systems. So basically meaning when something triggers me, it's going to make me respond differently than if the same thing happened to you. So a very, very small example is sometimes something as small as the toaster popping will really, really make me jump and scare me. And a part of that is an instant response. My amygdala, my brain picked up of like, oh, a potential threat. And my partner's always like, you scare so easily. And although I do not have a horrendous experience with a toaster by any stretch of the imagination, it is that sudden sound and movement that my nervous system is freaked out by. And so it responds to that to keep me safe. And so each of us have different things, different triggers, different responses to things that have been shaped to keep you safe. And so you might not know what those things are directly. You might not have a list of what they are. And for some of us, again, it's those irrational things like the toaster where you don't have a direct experience with that thing, but your mind begins to associate things as such. And so anything that has a loud, sudden sound disrupts my nervous system. And so I really just wanted to start off with opening with that because I think it's important to know that as much as we all have an alarm system, each and every one of us has a window of tolerance. Similarly to each of our amygdalas being different, each of our window of tolerances are different, meaning the threshold and space that you have to carry on things in life is different than mine, is different than my mom or dad's or my partner's or my friends or family. All of us have it differently. The reason for that is because as we go through experiences, our body begins to adapt as such, begins to prepare and begin to try to predict certain outcomes, again, to keep you safe. The real reason I wanted to talk about all this is because it's important for us to begin to know when we're in fight or flight. And do you know when you are in an active state of fight or flight? And for most of us, the answer to that is no, we don't, because we're not taught these things. And as I was sitting here, and I always have the window of tolerance in my office as a point of reference, I'm like, this has become general knowledge to me because I studied it and because I worked it. But if I hadn't taken that path, would this actually be general knowledge? And am I taking that for granted that I know and understand that? And so I couldn't sit here and just pre-assume that everybody in the world just knows what a window of tolerance is and knows that we have different thresholds and knows that we all respond differently. And so that's really why I wanted to share this, because if you're not aware that you're even living in a survival state, so in that fight or flight state, you could be living your whole life not knowing that your body is almost in an autopilot state. You could be living not as good a quality of life as possible because you're in a survival state. And here's what I want you to know. The beautiful thing about our window of tolerance and healing is that it can get better. All the work that I did as a counselor for over 2 years was exactly this. It was helping clients widen their window of tolerance. And basically, all that means is being able to come back to your body in a safe place. And so you might be thinking, okay, how do I know that I'm not in my body in a safe place? That's a great question. And I only really began to notice the duality of when I was and when I wasn't as I started to heal. And yoga was really where I started to feel this for myself, where there would be times that I would come back to my body and I would notice things that I had never noticed before. I would really consciously hear the thoughts in my head. I'd be really conscious about my body, not in a bad way, but just aware. And so even right now, I want you to assess for yourself, how much of your life do you feel you're spending in your body, in your heart center, grounded and present? And we can think that we are, but how much do you think you truly are? A lot of indicators that you might not be are if you have a high resting heart rate, if you feel like your digestion isn't the best, like IBS, stuff like that. If you have a lot of gut issues, and these are not in any way, shape, or form, I'm not diagnosing you. These are just things that are very common when we're in an active survival state, because I had all of these and then some. Sometimes menstrual pains and blocks like that can be present. Chronic stress, trouble sleeping, vivid dreams, anything like that is really just an indicator that your body is not coming back to its natural rest and digest state. And I want you to know, again, that it's okay. It's not okay in the way that things have happened to you to allow that to happen. But what's okay is that you're not alone and that your body is doing such a phenomenal job at trying to keep you safe because it loves you and it cares about you and it wants to do what's best for you. But it's our job with our conscious mind as you're listening to this episode and in our everyday life to do the work to help our body out. It does everything for us. I've said this before, on the inside to look after us and nourish us. But it's our job on the outside to do the healing, to do the work, to do the reflections, to sit in silence, to do the meditation, to go to therapy, and to begin to build that relationship with ourselves. One of the biggest things that I know has helped me in my mental health is working on my relationship with myself. And I don't just mean what I think of myself when I look in the mirror and my self-image and those things, but it's how present am I with myself? How much time am I allowing my consciousness and me to be together? How much am I checking in with myself? How much am I validating my feelings and expressing my needs and doing what feels right for me? And this is really, I would like to say that I've been working on this for years. This has really only started to, I'll say the words, pay off in the last couple of months. It takes time. You're quite literally redesigning your neural pathways of your brain. You're redesigning the biology of your body and the DNA of your body. When we rewire our thoughts, there are DNA fundamental changes that happen to you. When people tell me, you just don't look recognizable, you look completely different, there's a part of my heart and higher self that's always like, yeah, girl, that's because we're not the same. I've had to rechange so much. And as much as that is sometimes a far-stretched thing to say, it is true. It's so true. I'm not the same person energetically or, physically I am, but in a lot of ways physically I'm not, as in high school or my first couple of years of, post-secondary. I'm not that person. And that is because I've worked on widening my window of tolerance and worked on grounding and worked on childhood trauma and worked on, my traumas from my basketball experience and just different things in my life that hurt me and posed harm. And each and every one of you listening have things in your life that have shaped you and harmed you. But we can work on that and we can work on rechanging that. And so I think it's really important that I kind of explain what the window of tolerance is. And I definitely encourage you to Google a picture of the window of tolerance. If extra brownie points if you print it off and have it somewhere in your house. But even just look at it. Become friends with it, because when you have the visual, I'll never forget my clients used to say, I would ask on a session on Zoom, I would draw a graph and I'd be like, where are you in your window of tolerance? And they would point to me roughly where they were. When we have a visual of what it looks like, it allows us to assess for ourselves, I'm kind of up here, I'm kind of hanging down here. And so for those of you that are listening and you're like, okay, I still don't understand what you're talking about, can you please explain this thing? Absolutely. But that's just something I wanted to throw in, that I encourage you to get a picture of one. For those of you that are watching video, I will show you very quickly what it looks like. I have a piece of paper here, my cheat sheet. I always have this in my office because, again, it helps me to assess for myself where I'm hanging out. So when we're in our window of tolerance, again, that is when we are in that rest and digest nervous system. We are calm, we are grounded, we're chill, we're present, and we can be shot out of our window of tolerance in two different directions. And it's important to note that we do not choose which direction we go into. The same as if you are in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, you do not choose which one you go in. Your brain very quickly in a microsecond picks which one to act upon that it thinks will best get you through whatever it is that you're going through. So the first way you can be shot out of your window of tolerance is in hyperarousal. So hyperarousal, based on the photo, and I'm sorry if this is super loud with the mic, is kind of demonstrated with a volcano. And that's really, really what it kind of feels like when you're in that state, right? So typically when you're in hyperarousal, you're anxious, you're angry, you're overwhelmed, you feel out of control, you want to burst, and your body just wants to fight, it wants to run away, it wants to escape. And so think of a time you've ever just felt like, wow, like there's so much energy in my body and I'm so angry, and everything makes it worse and worse and worse, and it escalates and escalates. That's a really good example of being in your hyperarousal state. Quite literally, the opposite of that is where you could also be shot out of your window in reverse, which would be our free state, which is hypoarousal. So down here, you typically feel like zoned out, you feel frozen, you feel numb, you feel dissociated. What else is on here? Spacey, your body wants to shut down. And so we typically all have a tendency that we go to. We all experience both. We experience both of these situationally, but we typically have a tendency that we go to. And my tendency, I was gonna say is still, when I'm triggered or overwhelmed, hypoarousal. I very rarely am like an angry person. I'm typically somebody who shuts down, is very submissive. Dissociation has been my best friend for my whole life, where I kind of just like space out and go somewhere else in my mind. And so getting to know what your tendency is also just very validating, because it allows you to just say, hey, when I go into that state, it's not that I'm doing anything wrong. It's not that there's anything wrong with me. My body's responding in a way of what it thinks is best. And it's really representing the emotions that you're feeling. In emotions, the word emotion literally means energy in motion, which is very, very cool when you put it that way. And so when we think about it, when we have these big emotions, these states are both that energy in motion. It is responding out of the way and such. And so, I don't know what I just said there at the end, but basically what I'm trying to say is when we have these big emotions, they are valid and you're feeling them for a reason. I want to say that just because our body kind of picks which direction to go into, that does not excuse the fact that we are still responsible for our behavior. So just because you were shot into a hyperarousal state does not then make it okay to yell at people, to break things, to, be violent, to do things that are mean. And so it's really important that we get to know what our tendency is, but we also have to take responsibility for our actions. And that is why my goal with educating you on these things is that once you can begin to become friends with your emotions, it allows you to feel them in a safe way. I strongly thought of this example when I was writing down a couple things for this episode. So yesterday I went thrifting for, like an hour or so. And as I started this episode, I was just excited, I was jumpy, I was pumped, and thrifting is my favorite thing in the whole world. If you know me well, it's my favorite thing. It lights me up like a Christmas tree. I just love it so much. And I was so excited to show my partner the things that I had got. And it's not that he wasn't excited, but he didn't necessarily match the energy that I had in my head, which again, is not his responsibility. I had a pre-existing kind of narrative of what I thought would play out in my head. And when he didn't respond in that way, and he was not malicious in any way, shape, or form, he was excited, but it just didn't go the way that it had in my head. I just don't want to paint a negative picture of him because he did nothing wrong. This is just a prime example. My brain viewed that as nobody cares about the things that you got. Like, why are you so excited about this? And my trigger beneath that, like beneath the surface, is your feelings and emotions aren't valid and don't matter. When that is triggered for me, whether it is, again, it's the same as the toaster, it wasn't actually happening, but it reminded me of pain. My body instantly shot into a hypoarousal state. And my partner said, I felt a shift, what's wrong? What happened? And I got so in denial where I'm fine, nothing happened. And so it's important in those moments, and I came back around after and we had a beautiful conversation and I, was finally able to express how I was feeling. It's hard in the moment sometimes, but each time we get into a state of hyper or hypoarousal, it's important that we become detectives and we assess for ourselves what it is that caused the trigger. Because the more we can become friends with what our trigger was, what it was that happened, that caused it, it allows us to be more proactive in the future. I was able to then later express to him, whenever I feel like little Jessie feels unseen or unheard, I shut down and I get really extra hurt because I've experienced that a lot in my life. And then I just said, all I ask is that you just be gentle with me when I'm in that excited state. Just hold that energy with me. You don't need to do anything. Just know that that is a trigger for me. And that is it. And being able to express those things with those that you love is so important. And you're also so worthy to be with someone and have people in your life that can hold that space for you. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't at the place where they're able to do so. And so if you're listening to this and this is your first time learning this, maybe this is something you and your partner work on together, where you kind of explore this. And next time one of you gets triggered, you just stop and say, hey, I learned on this podcast something called the window of tolerance. And obviously we got to be careful in certain moments bringing things up because it can make it worse or more triggering, or it can feel like an attack. And so likely having these conversations when you're not triggered. But I think this is one of the healthiest ways that couples can resolve so much conflict, is because it's typically when you're both in these triggered states that one's attacking, the other's attacking back, attack, and then you're just escalating these scenarios that don't have to be that big. We need to work each individually on widening and expanding our window of tolerance. And really what that is in our window of tolerance is the capacity to take on things without it overwhelming us. So we can have stress happen and we're riding the wave and it doesn't trigger us. But when we've undergone trauma or things in our life and our window of tolerance becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, it's basically like we don't have any resilient space to take on anything. And so we're just easily tipped over. It's like a glass that's filled with water, and as soon as any's added, it just overpours. Widening your window of tolerance is like slowly taking a little bit of that water out. It doesn't have to be completely empty, but we just have to create capacity to add on things in life. Inevitably, you're gonna have things happen in life that are going to metaphorically pour that water into your cup, that are going to overwhelm your system. And it's important that we're proactive of saying, hey, these things are gonna happen in life. How can I work with myself to prepare myself for these things to happen? What is it that is my go-to tendency? What is it that I would like my tendency to be? And is how I respond now how I want to respond in the future? And if the answer is no, how can you be gentle with yourself and work towards improving that? This is where therapy becomes my shameless plug, because working with a therapist who is trauma-informed and who understands these things can just be really, really helpful. It can be that sounding board and that safe person to A, educate you on these things, but B, getting things off your chest and just talk therapy is so beneficial. And when we can get into our body and do future things like EMDR and tapping and internal family systems and all that stuff, it's very, very beneficial. But so much of this just starts with validation, with awareness, with even knowing that this is an option. So many people go to therapy and they're like, well, I don't really have problems right now, so I don't really know why I'm here. We all have things in our body that have affected us. We all have ways of responding to things. We can all improve when our emotions take over and what we do in those moments. But when we don't know, we don't know. And if you don't know that this option exists for you, why would you take action? How would you even know to do so? And so that was really my goal of today's episode, was to educate you a little bit on how to know if you're in fight or flight, which is your hypo and hypoarousal. Educate a little bit on the window of tolerance and just talk and validate the fact that your emotions and feelings in response to things are valid and it happens for a reason. And so it's about working with ourselves instead of against ourselves. So I truly hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you can't tell, it's something that I am very passionate about from the bottom of my heart, and something that I could talk all day about. It lights me up. It's something that changed my life once I learned it. And so if I can help even one of you improve your life and improve your mental health, then I truly feel like my job is done. So if you enjoyed this episode and you want to start the conversation with someone, I encourage you to send this to them. Just say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And just see where it goes. Talking about mental health is pretty freaking cool in my opinion, and I think that if we can start to normalize those conversations, we're just one step forward to the magnificent, beautiful world. So thank you guys so much. I hope your Januaries are continuing to just be amazing, and I can't believe we're halfway through, which is just blowing my mind, but I am so excited to chat with you all next week. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I'll chat with you then. Bye, you guys.